What is up, everybody? This is Silver Spook, and this is the Silver Spook video about the horror of being Asian in a Western world, as well as a review of this movie, Umma, which just go watch it if you like. Well, it's a horror movie, so just be careful. PG-13, so not as bloody as some things, but less bloody than Resident Evil. But yes, so we will today be talking about some topical topics in light of the U.S. yet again threatening to end the lives of the entire planet, and certainly endangering everyone in Asia, but also everyone in the Pacific, and it's really endangering everyone in the U.S. as well. And with Nancy Pelosi's trip to Taiwan, obviously, kind of being the current event that I'm kind of speaking around, but also like it's a good point to discuss also a topic that is much deeper and wider ranging, which is the experience of actually 2/3 of the world. So actually, this fact is like it's kind of like hard to even wrap your head around it, especially if you're somebody who was raised. I mean, I was speaking as somebody that was raised. To be clear, I'm also Asian and Pacific Islander. I'm Native Hawaiian and also have Asian ancestry, multiple Asian, but also have Caucasian ancestors as well. But raised as a person of Hawaii, but raised also in a colonized Western culture, which is one of the complicated factors, one of the complications in this process, in this reality of being Asian. And I'm not, Pacific Islanders are kind of its own thing, but being part of that entire Asian and Pacific, really, it's the vast majority of the Earth. It's 2/3 of the world, and most of people in the United States who are for the 20th century have been engaged in all kinds of horrible actions. Their countries have, and many of the people as well in these wars, the Korean War, the Vietnam War. The Cold War, which involves China, today's war, right? The U.S. is great power competition that involves China, potential conflicts they're threatening and always in committing hybrid war against. And most people don't understand almost anything, really. They heard about some anti-Asian racism and lots of Asia bad, China bad stuff, and Japan anime and robot dogs good stuff. K-pop is fun for the kids, but nobody knows. You can watch all the anime in the world. You don't know the actual Asian experience. My grandma look a lot like this, Umma, the grandma character in this movie, the kind of haunting mom that comes after the daughter. My grandma was full Japanese, and it's striking how similar her experiences and her daughter's experience is. Also a mother-daughter story, but it's specifically an Asian immigrant to the United States mother-daughter experience, which is its own thing. And so and that's the thing that that's a thing that's its own entire. You could do an entire video just on that. You could talk all forever about that, but also specifically. And not like Asia is a huge place. This is not a monolithic experience, obviously. So I'm talking. This is a huge brush, but there is something that does. There are many things that unite Asia. When you're Asian in the West, right? To the Western mind, you could be Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese. They don't care. You're just Asian, and that's like. People don't want to talk about that. That's the reality. Nobody cares. Like Danny Haifong, somebody who was, was at least a slave. We're going to be doing a panel later on, but might not be able to make it. But Danny is a great journalist, one of the few journalists in the United States. I don't think it's a mistake that he's an Asian person, an Asian diaspora person, right? That's trying to speak the truth in the United States, along with the Black Agenda Report, Black Alliance for Peace, etc. Danny was mistaken for an Afghan person by an American veteran and was almost murdered. It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. Afghanistan is a place in Asia as well, but it's Afghans, Vietnamese, same thing. Chinese, Japanese, same thing. Korean. Anyway, so that's one of the horrors, is just being lumped into this massive hive mind mass, faceless, expressionless, just lump of insects, spilling out into Europe, spilling out into America, called Asia. It just to be treated like it doesn't really, they don't care, it doesn't matter. That is a horror movie experience of your life itself. Is just to be treated like, we don't care. You're all the same, Vietnamese, Chinese, Japanese. You're just some yellow people over there, and then when you speak up, they're like, shut up, we don't want to hear about it. Like, you're being very Asian. Like, that's actually a comment that mainstream news anchors can have. Like, there's that famous, like last year there was that Korean anchor was just talking about, some people have Thanksgiving turkey and gravy and mashed potatoes, but I'm gonna have some dumplings and noodles. And people called in to the news station, right? Mainstream American, like, liberal state, and people called into the station saying, you were being very, when you talked about your dumplings, your newscaster was being very Asian. I just thought that was very racist. I don't want to hear about your dumplings. I don't want to hear about your noodles. Despite Americans constantly disproportionately eating those things in all of the Chinatowns and all the restaurants that Asians are cooking for you. But that and it was deemed appropriate that you could just call in, because just being too Asian in any space is unacceptable and also deemed worthy of violence. Verbal, physical, emotional, economic. That's what Chinatowns are. There's Asians trying to survive genocide and massacres in the West. That's why there's Chinatowns. They're not there as cute little theme parks and just, they're not mysteries. They are survival mechanisms. That's what a Chinatown is. So that the horror of the Chinatown is like the zombie. It's like the apocalypse. Like when people in the apocalypse, all the zombies are coming, right? Like in Resident Evil, and they're jumping through the walls, and you're trying to get all your ammunition. They're trying to stop yourself from being destroyed by this horde of people who just want nothing but more than to kill you and eat you. Chinatown is like the apocalyptic fort that Asians build, so they don't get mass lynched as individuals, like on a railroad somewhere. That's what there's a word there was a phrase, the Chinaman's chance, because any Asian could be massacred at the whim of white people anywhere in the United States. That's still the case. That's what the last 2 years of like no coverage of escalating anti-Asian violence and murder, and nothing has been done about it, says. The West still doesn't care. So it's really a horror. It's also its own unique horror show to be a black person in the United States. It's a horror show to be a Hawaiian person with the U.S. illegal military occupation in Hawaii. It's a horror show to be an indigenous person in the settler colonial genocide factory called the United States. But it's a unique horror show also just to be Asian, just generally on the earth, period, in a Western hegemonic planet. Not just inside of, but just anywhere in the world. And I think people understand at least a little bit more about the anti-indigeneity, anti-blackness. People feel sad. Not necessarily they're going to do a lot of things for the black and indigenous, and well, it's when you get into Latin and Hispanic, it's complicated. But people that are treated as brown, black, and socialized in that way, and or that are viewed in that way. If people understand in the West, at least there has been a history of anti-blackness, right? There's Black Lives Matter movement and these things, right? But the anti-Asianness is like so well buried for whatever confluence of reasons. But as an Asian person, because I'm an Asian person and a Pacific Islander person, with my, again, like my grandma was full Asian. Like, I have to speak on this because, I know I've done this before, but I feel like this is a good time to talk about it. So anyways, let me get back to the topic and stop wandering. Sorry, I'm just like running my stream. So let's talk about what Americans don't understand about Taiwan. Just first up, I will just say, like, the movie, just to talk a little bit about the movie. I know it's not usually what people are here for, but just on the movie itself. Let's see if I can get Sandra Oh. So just like it's not about Taiwan. I know opened it with Taiwan. I made an entire thread yesterday about Taiwan. I'm going to come to that very soon. Are you ready for Sandra Oh's a horror villain? So Sandra Oh plays the main character in this show. She is she is the descendant of a Korean diaspora family who left Korea and came. It doesn't go too much into what exactly happened and what it doesn't go into the history of Korea and the U.S. and Korea very much. But that's not really the central focus. But her mother and father left Korea. Mother was respected as a hanbok. I'm sorry if I'm getting that wrong. It resembles a kimono. It's not a kimono, obviously, but if you look at this, the top part, it has it's a robe that's specifically made. It's a traditional Korean dress, Korean wear, and the mother, let's get a picture of it. And so there's lots of pictures on them, right? And so Sandra Oh's, the character's mother, was like a well-respected hanbok maker, right? And in Korea, and but her father wanted, he wanted more. He wanted to come to quote unquote land of opportunity, which is its own thing. How much opportunity is actually in the United States? Questionable. But at the same time, that's a whole other layer of like, why is it seem like it could be better in the United States? Mostly because of Western imperialism, racism, destruction, and warfare that's destroying your Asian countries, right? I think a lot of Asians like would not have moved, right? And this came up in the Everything Everywhere All at Once stream. But anyway, that's a I don't want to go off on that tangent right now. So apparently, like the father is like, I want to come to America because it's the land of opportunity. It's like very briefly, he doesn't show up in the movie, but it's kind of like she didn't really want to go, right? So Umma's the Sandra Oh main character didn't really want to. The mother didn't really want to come, but the father was like, no, let's go and let's see what we can do. Let's see if we can live the American dream in the United States of America, and I'll build a great company and we'll live in a suburb and have a white picket fence and 1.5 kids and a bouncy castle and a Thunderbird and a lawn or something like that. That sounds good, right? And and not be under. Well, anyway, we'll get to that later. What actually is happening in Korea, but is happening. But Sandra, so the mother comes to the United States, right? So I can get a picture of the actual let's see if I can get the actual mother. So Sandra Oh's mother is represented by this mask, and so Sandra Oh, it's a 3-generational women's story. It's a mother to daughter, and then the daughter to the granddaughter story. It's like a 3-generational Asian diaspora story. So and the mask is one of the mask. It was the mask of, and I'm sorry, it has a specific name. I'm trying to keep my train of thought and not look it up right now, but it's a traditional mask, and it's also the grandmother's mask, but it also represents kind of like with her other objects, her continuing spirit that lives on. And there's a very dark side to all that. Here's the grandma that you see like briefly, and so the grandma is kind of appearing. It's unclear if it's like if Sandra Oh is just hallucinating her, or if she's actually there, her spirit's there. But either way, you get the kind of point, which is that the grandma didn't want to come to the United States, right? She wanted to stay in Korea and keep being a well-respected, hanbok maker, and be with her family and with her ancestors and with her culture. There's a very important scene like where it's like what is it? The uncle in Umma shows up with the grandma's Sandra Oh's uncle, right? Shows up with Sandra Oh's mom or the grandma characters. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to find it. He shows up with the ashes of grandma, and he says like, your mother has died. Your mother has died. Yeah, here, this one. Yeah. And he has this box, right? Uncle has the box with all of the things. And he says, why weren't you there? Why weren't you there for Umma? Why weren't you there when she passed away? You were her daughter. You were the one who she was closest to you. She needed you. She didn't have anyone. She was alone. And you killed, and the uncle says, he's kind of a dick. He's like, you killed your mom because you left her alone and she died of loneliness and a broken heart, right? Your mother was a Korean woman lost in America, and she was isolated and sad and alone. And you, her daughter, was the only one there, and you killed your own mother by breaking her heart and leaving her. And he has this box, and it's this like trauma trip. But it's like, why'd you got to do that, man? And he says like, what, you've been cut off. Cassandra was also cut off. Her character lives in a rural area somewhere, I think in California, with no electricity. She has no electricity. She has no phone. She has not even electrical vehicles are not allowed anywhere in the property. She has no connection to the outside world, outside of like in-person discussions. And so the uncle said, it's so hard to find you. And there's reasons for that you have to go through the movie. But the uncle is like, it was so hard to find you. He's a little bit upset because he had to like hunt her down. He had to like track her down when she has no digital or electronic presence in the world. And he's like, but I brought you your mother's things, and this is her, hanbok. I have her ashes, and there's a part where it's like, the uncle finds Sandro's daughter, right? This character. And he speaks to her as he's driving to this isolated, she's like an off the grid cottagecore, off the grid organic honey maker. She just makes honey far away from civilization. Like she doesn't have a Instagram or Twitter, right? But then this dude that just like regular like white dude American guy that's like kind of working with her to help sell the honey. He's actually her employee technically, I think. And he's like, hey, your honey is really blowing up on your honey farm is really blowing up on Instagram, and it went viral on social media. And he's like a 60-year-old guy. He's like, I don't understand what any of that means. And he's like, because she doesn't even use a phone. She doesn't have a phone. She doesn't have any electricity at all. The house, electrical sockets, the lamps, the lights, the electric grinder, the toaster. There's no electric devices anywhere in the house, right? So Sandra was like, I don't know what that means. And then the dude's like, well, I don't really know what that means either, because I'm like a 60-year-old boomer. I'm just trying to sell honey in this store in town. But everyone's online, everyone's buying it. So whatever you're doing, make as much honey as you want. And anyways, but it's kind of like, the daughter, when the daughter is coming by, and so they're very isolated. So the mother has like taken her daughter and isolated her like away from the world completely, like absolutely. Or not absolutely, but as much as possible, for reasons, right? Maybe not the best, but you find that out later. But the daughter encounters the uncle, right? So this daughter the granddaughter, the daughter of the main character, encounters the uncle character, right? And as he's driving there, and he's speaking Korean to the daughter because he assumes like, oh, maybe this is the daughter of my niece. But the granddaughter, she doesn't speak any Korean, right? So when the uncle gets there, he's like, why doesn't your daughter speak Korean? And Sandra Oh's like, well, she's American, right? And I could go off on that forever, that, but she's American. We're not Korean anymore, right? I'm not Korean. She doesn't. And Sandra Oh's character, like, gets rid of all the Korean stuff as much as possible. She's just like wipes that. Like, part of it is just there's like she has. Let's be upfront about it. The mother did terrible. The grandmother who came over from Korea, right, in her suffering by being isolated, by being Asian in America. What I already said is a horror show. You could be killed at whim. You could be abused. You could be knocked over on the street like a 90-year-old woman or dude. Like every day this is happening. This has always happened. Nobody talks about it, for whatever reason. partially because the most successful counter-hegemonic anti-capitalist entities in the world are Asian. Let's be real. That's why. So, especially since after World War II. But the reality is that, like, but the grandma's experience of being Asian in America and like not being respected, being isolated, not speaking English, right? And being one of those elder Asians in America, like in a Chinatown or in any area, but probably somewhere in a San Francisco Chinatown sort of situation. Those are the highest rates of poverty in the United States is actually Asian people. It's not Black, it's not Indigenous, it's not any of the categories that you think. It's actually Asians. The highest rates of category, especially elderly Asians. Nobody cares about that. They're just cooking my noodles. They're just cleaning my clothes, trying to survive mass lynching. So the grandma's experience was terrible, right? And like she suffered horribly. She was doing much better in Korea, even with all of the imperialist wars and sanctions and garbage. And so the Asian grandma is like, but then she takes that suffering and that trauma of being in the United States. I'm reading a little extra into that, but I mean I'm telling you because my grandma was one of those people. Right, my grandma. She was from a town, Onomichi, which is actually right next to my grandma. Was actually Japan has its own colonial history, so I'm not gonna pretend like there's not that own terrible crap. We're gonna get to that one, but as an Asian person, town. It's actually a town near Hiroshima, which I don't know if you know this. That town was that place was nuked. And hundreds of thousands of people died in an instant needlessly, but because the United States wanted to scare Asian communists, right? They just killed a bunch of civilians. But my grandma is actually from the town right near there, my grandma's mother came over from Asia to what was the U.S. occupation of Hawaii. Now, Asians in sovereign Hawaii, different story. Before 1893 and the U.S. illegal occupation, banning our language, culture, all that stuff I'm always going off about. But after, when the U.S. occupied Hawaii, they crushed Asians' rights. They made them second-class citizens. They ghettoized everyone. They burned all of our businesses and Hawaiian and Asian businesses, which were cooperating very well. I mean, disproportionately Chinese, but there was Japanese, there's Vietnamese, there were Koreans in Hawaii. There's a variety of people in Hawaii, Filipino, all kind of Asian and Pacific Islanders were cooperating in Hawaii. The U.S. occupation made Hawaii a U.S.-like place, right? And that's why I speak English. Not that I wouldn't speak English, but that's why I was Americanized, and that's why lots of things. My parents hate themselves as Asian and Pacific Islanders. They hate themselves, and they. Anyway, so but my dad is a son of he is a Sansei son, on top of being a Hawaiian, but he's also a Sansei. He's a third generational son of an Asian diaspora in the United States, right? In a Western world, which was a horror show for my grandma. I can tell you this, right? And she re-traumatized her own children. She did. She like would she beat them up in the same way that she physically, emotionally and physically harmed, but also she had a drunken white husband who was also terrible, like his father before him. So we have there's so many layers to this thing. You see, the colonization is such a massive zoo of a mess. It's so difficult to untangle it sometimes, but long story short, there was a lot of trauma, like in coming over from Asia to the United States in Hawaii, but also for Sandra Oh's mother in this film, coming from Korea to California was it was a traumatic experience of suffering. It's not. This is the myth we must be dispelling, which is that there's some great life to be had in the United States. I mean, yes, there's possibly some slight economic opportunity increases, but especially, and maybe a little more in the 1950s era when, but in the long story, in the longer if you the deal is far more marketing. It's more airbrushed than it is, and especially if you are Asian, you're gonna show up and you're gonna be mistreated, and nobody's gonna listen to you, and you're gonna just cross your fingers and hope that your daughter or your son becomes a lawyer or a doctor or something. But a lot of times it doesn't happen, but sometimes. And what do you trade for that? You trade your entire heritage. You trade your ancestors. You trade your language. You sell your culture, your language, your mother tongue is what it costs, and your children will now be Americans. Your children might be an Asian doctor making six figures, with going to the yoga and the Starbucks and getting lattes and having a, Orange County suburban, McMansion or maybe, right? And then you can go retire in that. But what did you lose? Who you were, your entire history. Now you are part of the empire. Was it worth it to be the grandma that retires in that? What if your daughter doesn't be? What if you're like in Everything Everywhere All at Once, and your daughter, like you, and your daughter's daughter are just laundromat workers being investigated, right? Like I made a stream about Everything Everywhere All at Once, right? That's part of it. Where Michelle Yeoh's, you just in poverty forever, and then America is mass lynching you even more than they were before in the run up to the Cold War and hybrid war on China. So, it's like so long story short, if you're Asian, then don't come to the United States. I mean, and if you do, not that anybody is thinking about doing that right now. I don't think they're trying to get out, if anything. But that's what's sold to people around the world with very good propaganda and mass lying. But anyways, so that's but the trauma and so the grandma is upset. It's like, why was I drugged? Why did I marry this man? But the part of the thing is you have to, she's like trying to do what is going to make him happy. And so she comes over, but then she's very upset. She's like, why did we come to America? Why did we come here? I can't speak the language. I can't make my dresses. I can't make my hanbok. I'm isolated. There's so many racist people here in the United States, even in the so-called progressive democratic cities that are full of people knocking me over in the street, like those 2,000% increase of anti-Asian violence in the last several years. I don't want to be in this America, and but the grandma, anyway, so kind of get back to the story, get off of that tangent. The grandma takes all that suffering and pain and anger and rage out on the daughter, and like physical abuse. There's just clutching onto her, and the daughter has to deal with all of it, right? And she just kind of holds it in. That's another very Asian. That's a specifically Japanese thing, I would say. But I can't speak for all the cultures. But I mean, half my family is like this. They don't talk. Somebody said, I think one of the people's like, Japanese can be very cold. I'm like, yeah, no, my family is. I have white and Japanese family, and there's like two layers of cold, distant snobbishness going on there. And not to say that everybody's like that, but there's like. There can be a, like, we don't talk about. There's this kind of my family members, my Asian family members, they will call it the Bushido mentality. You just suffer and then you move forward. You don't talk about anything. You just suffer. You suffer it and you do your duty. And then you move forward. That's like you gotta stab the wakizashi into your stomach when you dishonor, and you rip your guts out, and then and then someone chops your head off if you even think about opening your mouth. Someone will chop your head off so you can die and it's weird and fucked up and toxic shit. This samurai bullshit. But anyways, it's I'm not saying that's Japan is not Korea is not Vietnam is not China is not Japan, etc. But there is a thing to, like, you just suffer and we don't talk about certain things. Now it's different in other places, but for my family anyway, and maybe it's a diaspora thing too, where it's just like, just get through this, survive America, hope our kids become like Chinese Elon, or hope my kids become Japanese Elon, hope my Indian son becomes, a brain surgeon, and you just shut up and take it and feed Get rid of all the spice and all the cumin and all the chili and all of the ethnic culture, and make my son eat apple pie and hot dogs and speak really good English. Get rid of my culture and hope he becomes a doctor, make a lot of money in America. And in the Asian diaspora, you tend to get capitalist, fascist-y. The kind of people that leave places like Cuba and South Central America. They come like Marco Rubio's parents, Ted Cruz's parents. Those kind of people. America's a dumpster for all the world's most horrible people. Not some people are fleeing legitimate crises, obviously, and asylum seekers, but there's an attitude that's like, just shut up, suffer, make sure your kids like get 1,600 SATs, which is the extra pressure up on the children of Asian diaspora people, or all diaspora people. But there's a special one. I worked in Chinatown with the underserved, at-risk youth of Hawaiian, Samoan, Tahitian, Filipino, Japanese, Vietnamese, Chinese descent. One year I had like 30 Chinese and Vietnamese. Some are Chinese Vietnamese in my class. I was a social worker, STEM teacher for like, the impoverished. I was basically trying to do poverty alleviation in a hellscape empire that doesn't care about poverty, but trying my best to do that. And one year we had all these Chinese in the Chinatown. There's like 30 of them. But the moms were like all over those kids. Like the kid, I felt bad for some of the kids. Were like, the mom's like, you have to get into the private school that costs $30,000 a year. We don't have any money. We came from Shanghai. We came from this other poor area of wherever we were, and you have to they would pressure the children so hard. You have to succeed. You have to succeed. You have to succeed. We sacrificed. And we came to this racist place, but you're going to be as American as possible and make a lot of money here, because I think there's more opportunity to make money here. So, and it's like, I don't know, it's kind of messed up, man. Why do you do that to your children? Why do you like put all of your dreams and all of your dreams and your hopes and everything and make your children work 25 times as hard? I mean, it's kind of, to maybe even not even get there because America's too racist to let. Or they get to be a doctor, but then they get disrespected and they get fired and they get, treated like garbage during Wuhan flu time. And the Asian who's like has had no friends and no family because they've been spending 8 hours a day after school trying to get 1,600 SATs for you, right? And I mean, I had friends who had like nervous breakdowns. They were hospitalized from the pressure of high stakes testing, high stakes. Academic performance that their parents are putting on them. It's not fair to the kids, anyway, but there's lots of layers to that. So, I went to some fancy private school. Again, I went to the fancy private school only because my father taught there, and we could get the $20,000 a year tuition for free. Now it's $20,000. It was less then, but I'm from the ghetto of Hawaii. So, anyways. But back to the main story. So the generation, the suffering of the mother character is then being placed upon the daughter, or the grandmother character is being placed upon the Sandra Oh main character, who is then because she was abused by her mother, she says, I don't want anything to do with anything Korean. I want to be as far away from my mother and all the Korean people, by extension, as possible. I don't want to have an internet. I don't have no phone. There's no way she can get in contact with me because that was horrible, right? So the secondhand trauma, the cycle of violence, the secondhand trauma from just that the first generation was visiting upon the second generation, then causes the second generation to be like, I'm gonna get as far away from this as possible in this story. That's not always how it plays out, but that's how this story is. I'm just gonna take my daughter and go in the middle of nowhere, but then by doing that, it's kind of like I'm gonna cut all of my culture off. I'm gonna sever all the culture off. Like my mother liked kimonos. My mother liked the hanbok. My mother was a traditional Korean woman with traditional Korean practices and language. I'm gonna never speak Korean again. I'm never gonna do anything Korean again. I mean, there's a whole level of, like I said, there's a push for people not just Asia but everywhere but there's a special kind of pressure to assimilate into American capitalist culture and ways from from Asia, but it's people from South Central America, from Africa. There's levels of this, right? And so, but the daughter is kind of like, I refuse to do any of this because of the trauma that you've caused me, and I want to be far away from you. Also, just I don't want to be anywhere near you. Anyway, so back to the story. So that's part of the horror of it, is like that being the second generation. But there's the thing I like about this movie is that it's not just a horror movie about a ghost, a nasty, bad, abusive mother or grandma figure, right? That's not, and the suffering is not just of the second generation, because then the mother, by taking the daughter away, right, and going into the middle of nowhere, right, into this house with no electricity. Sorry, where's my daughter picture? Taking the daughter away into the middle of nowhere. The second generation then violates the third generation, and Sandra Oh is like saying, "I'm never gonna be my mother. I'm never gonna be my mother. I'm never gonna be my mother," right? But then, like, over the course of the story, you start to see that, like, you know, Sandra Oh, you start to find out. Let's see if I can get a better picture of that. By taking her away to this place, far away, and isolating the daughter so much, she's actually, Sandra Oh is actually she is becoming her mother, even though she doesn't even really see it, right? She holds her daughter so close that Sandra Oh doesn't allow her daughter to have friends, have, you know, any kind of good experiences when she goes to school. And part of it is because she has, like, no, you know, social experience, and, you know, I have problems with school, generally speaking, and we also homeschool, so it's kind of like, you know, she's homeschooling the daughter, but, you know, it's like, you know, but we're not like completely cutting off, you know, our kids from everything, right? It's a different thing, but Sandra Oh is like, you know, like keeping the child like as isolated as possible, and it kind of like, and lies to the child, like, well, everyone hates you because you are weird, you're bad, no one will love you, you will, and Sandra tells her daughter, you will never have any friends, I am your only friend, I am the only person that will ever be your friend, because you are so odd and weird, you know, you don't even know who Miley Cyrus is, you don't know Kim Kardashian, you don't know how to use a phone, no one will ever be your friend except me, you have to be mine forever, you will be mine forever. You wanted to do beekeeping, right? And the daughter, so I did beekeeping. You wanted to have a good mother, so I was there. I was always there for you, and you will always be there for me. And you will, and so the daughter is like thinking about going to college at one point, and the mother is furious when she finds out her daughter, right? That the daughter character, has found that the daughter is secretly got, or not secretly, she just got a college application because she asked for one. And then at first the mother blames, you know, Sandra Oh, like, character blames her employee, that American guy that's helping her sell the honey, like, you put ideas in her head to steal my daughter away from me and send her to college. You know she can't handle college. She's not capable of dealing. She has to be with me forever, right? It's basically the thing. And it's kind of like this, I was just reading Braiding Sweetgrass, and there's a whole chapter called Tending Sweetgrass, which deals with the tragedy and the difficulty and loss of children as they, at the end of the cycle of the season of parenting, and then there's this deep, it's just sadness and emptiness, the empty nest thing, right? And so the mother is like, I can't let my child go. She has to stay with me. Why is she applying to college? You can't apply to college. You can't. And then the mother, like, sabotages her daughter's college the daughter has to type on a typewriter, because they don't have electricity, the entire college application, right? Which is its own horror, which is using a 1975 German typewriter, which is what William Gibson used to type Neuromancer. That's a weird cyberpunk aside, but using a typewriter in 2022 to type out your college application of 75 pages. That's a horror show in and of itself. That's some kind of like eldritch freaking typesetter nightmare. You know what I'm saying? And half of the audience is like, I don't even know what a typesetter is. That's what my grandpa used to do when he was married to my Japanese grandma. But anyways, back to the story. So Sandra Oh's character is sabotages her own daughter's college application to stop her from going to college. And she lies, and Sandra's, oh, it was your grandma. Your grandma's spirit came in. There's no one else here. It must be your grandma's ghostly demonic spirit came in and messed up your typewriting application. And it's unclear whether it's unclear because there's a supernatural. It's a ghosty story. So there's supernatural things are happening. It's like Stranger Things. Like, mass move. There's poltergeisty. Shelves are suddenly popping open, and then you see a demonic face. It's unclear like if it's real or what's happening, or are they all hallucinating this whole thing, right? But so then the Sandra's like, oh, it wasn't me. It was your grandma. It must be your grandma that's messing up your application. And the daughter's like, why are you acting like a psycho bitch? Like that's, he's like basically like, what's mom? You're just making stuff up. I'm never gonna talk to you. And then it gets really intense, right? But you are trying to stop me from going away, and you say that you don't want to be mom. You say you don't want to turn into grandma and be an abusive mother, but that's another lie. You already are your mother, right? So like that, and then it's like, oh fuck, and so it deals with this kind of like 3 generations of passing down the trauma of what's really colonialism at the end of the day. It's really passing on the trauma of like being a diaspora person, right? Being an Asian person in the Western world. Now, of course, in the entire planet, because the world is America's, fucking lake, and the Pacific is America's lake, and Asia is America's little treasure chest, along with Africa and everywhere else that the Anglo-Saxons and the Franks can't hold on to. So America does it for them. But being Asian in the diaspora inside the United States, in the Western world, is its own horror, and so that horror is then being is a vicious cycle of horror shows repeating itself through 3 generations, and so where was it going with that? Yeah, so the main character has to kind of reckon with, maybe I am becoming my mother, and it kind of goes back and forth, right? Like, am I? Like, she's just kind of in denial of it all for a lot of it, and it's kind of like unraveling layers of denial and examining what actually happened. It's like Sandra's character, like having to talk about what actually happened with the mother that she's never told the daughter. And that's one reason why the daughter is upset. It's like, mom, just talk to me. Just talk to me. Just talk to me. Why don't you just talk to me? But the mom doesn't want to talk, right? Like I said, it's like my cold freaking family. They don't talk about nothing, Sometimes it's better to not talk about everything, but sometimes it's kind of like, you can't never talk about, certain things, especially to people that are like directly in your family, and especially when it's like, do you want to have a relationship with your daughter? Do you want to have a relationship with this person? You gotta at least, you can't just be weird about that stuff. You gotta like explain like what's going on, right? Now part of it's the mother's scared that, she can't handle it. Like the mother can't handle talking about it. The daughter is gonna get scared and run away, or who knows, right? So the mother's just like trying to control everything and keep everything in its place, and in that sense also is like being who her mother was. But anyways, so the let me come back to the other thread I was thinking about. Yeah, so the characters are going through this. They're experiencing, nightmarish visions, right? They're talking about, they're having to it's unclear, like they're actually having to fight some demonic forces. I don't want to spoil it all, but it's they're dealing with a lot of they're dealing with the psychological suffering. They're dealing with the and also some supernatural realities at the same time. But yeah, so that's what I wanted to come to, which is the grandma's character. So at one point, it's not just that grandma is like some evil demon that's just out there that's gonna just like. I talk a lot about demons, so I should clarify which one are you talking about. So, because I make albums about demons being based in shit, but the demon in the sense of like a bad, horrible force that has to be stopped, right? Not like demonized people by the West that are actually based in cool and good, like indigenous people. But anyways, but the grandmother character is at one point you actually get to like the grandma's scary face comes off, and it's kind of like, and the mother has to like actually admit that like the mother has to the mother and the grandma, right? The first generation, right, and the second generation have to like reckon with the fact that, hey, it's kind of like Everything Everywhere All at Once a little bit with the mother-daughter relationship. Actually, it's actually similar to that. You know, every I have a video about Everything Everywhere All at Once that talks about that. Let me see if I can find that really fast. Where the mother-daughter relationship between it's actually very similar. The first generation and the second generation, the first generation and the second generation Asian immigrants dealing with their Everything Ever All at Once. Life ain't better. It's actually a very similar title to the last one, but you know, the point of that one was, this one was that life is not better in the United States, so it's kind of similar. But Everything Everywhere All at Once with, you know, Michelle Yeoh, Jonathan K. Kwan, what's I can't remember these guys' names off the top of my head. Jamie Lee Curtis, and what's the old guy's name? I can't remember. James Hong, the guy from Blade Runner and also from Big Trouble in Little China. Anyway, so in Everything Everywhere All at Once, it's not a horror movie, but it is a mother-daughter Asian diaspora experience in it. You know, they're still in a Chinatown. The mother's not dead, but it's a similar, like, you see the same theme playing out. Like the mother's like, you have to be perfect. You have to get ahead. You're not good in this. You eating too much. You're getting too fat. You have to be an all-American, you know, beauty queen. You have to have a better life than I did, because I just did laundry and I was sad and I didn't live my first generation Asian American dream life. So you have to try 25 times as hard and stress yourself out. And the daughter's like, I can't deal with this, mom. I'm getting out of here. So like half my family's Asian. So I've dealt with lots of these. I should say I've dealt with lots of our people in Chinatown at the STEM and the competency-based diploma program and the assisting and doing poverty alleviation in Chinatown. Seen lots of this kind of thing, and I feel bad for some of the kids because they'd be in my class. I'd be teaching like robotics and helping with after school homework. And I had the entire Andrew Lum, Siu Lum Pai. This is all like Hawaii Inside stuff. But I had like the entire Honolulu Chinatown Tiger Mom squad in there, like breathing fire down their kid's neck and be like, just give your kid a break. It's okay if they don't get a straight A this time, you know. And I was just like, just chill out a little bit. I didn't say that to the face though, because you know. Well, you know. Anyways, that pressure is a real thing, and there's like cultural reasons for it, and etc. But anyway, I'll get off of that. So, but it's not. It's like in the same way that at the end of Everything Everywhere All at Once, the mother and the daughter have to come to. Well, they do at least somewhat come to understand each other's experiences, like everyone at some point kind of does, including the husband and the wife. You know, it's a different reality. But so by the end of Umma, actually, give me 1 second. I gotta close this window. I'll be right back. So by the end of Umma, there's like the mother has to look the grandma in the eye and go, I'm sorry that you had this horrible experience of coming to the United States and not being able to be a seamstress, not being able to be a hanbok dressmaker. I'm sorry that you had to I can't find it, but I'm sorry that you couldn't keep, speaking your language and having a community of people that are your people. I saw you had to be severed off from your ancestors. I mean, that's horrible. I talk about that all the time as a native Hawaiian who's been severed off from my language. And then discovering, oh my God, everything I know is wrong. The United States is not the best country in the world. They actually beat the Hawaiian language out of my mother. So I mean, that's real stuff. That's not like, that's real trauma. That re-traumatizes me every time I talk about it, but I got to talk about it. So, but the mother has to go, the Sandra Oh's character has to go, this is not just all about me. You also have suffered in this process, right? Of coming to America, etc., and under these horrible circumstances. You suffered that, and that's terrible. Shoot, let me see if I can find a picture of that. Grandma in Umma. Shoot, there's like there's that really good scene where she's like having that. I'm not gonna be able to find it. Anyways, so but Sandra Oh is like, I understand that you also suffered, but I didn't deserve to also be re-traumatized and suffer more. I didn't deserve to be physically hurt on top of being like grabbed onto and used like an emotional tissue paper, right? I was talking to Holly about Holly was like, "Oh, some of these things are very real." It's like, it's kind of like the daughter, emotional support daughter. Different in right wing North American conservative Christian patriarchal culture. It's kind of like the daughter is the oldest daughter is the emotional support Eve of the traumatized mother. But it's different. But it's also like it's similar in the sense that like the daughter is like, I'm sorry that you had this bad experiences in your life, right? As a specifically Asian diaspora first generation woman who doesn't speak any English, all the layers of that was bad, right? Your husband probably should have not disrespected you. I mean, maybe your husband. I mean, it's not really clear what exactly happened, but with the husband. But it's like, for whatever reason, like, I'm sorry that you suffered this way, Mom, coming to America. But I didn't deserve to also be mistreated by you. And I didn't deserve to get like shocked and physically beat up and latched onto and just like overly burdened by your own horror, So there's like this 3-layer horror show. Each person's life is Japanese would be like the Issei and the Nisei and the Sansei, right? The first and the second and third generational experience is each its own horror show in the United States or in a Western world, in an imperial colonial world. And then each of the generations has to go, I could have been more understanding. I'm sorry that you had that experience. Like, Grandma, I'm sorry you had that experience, but you gotta stop doing that to me. And I can't continue to let you to run, because the grandma is still with the mom in her head. Even the grandma's dead, but that's part of the point. Is she's haunted. Sandra is haunted by her mother and the guilt that she still feels about leaving her mother out to dry, but she felt like she had to, right? And so it's kind of like this. It's like she can't actually, because the mother's dead and the mother is in an urn of cremated ashes. But part of it is like the grieving and those like internal discussions almost, right? And some of them are external with the actual daughter that's still alive, the granddaughter that's still alive. But each one of the generations has to go, I'm sorry that this happened to you. I didn't deserve the cycle of colonial violence that you transferred to me, and I will try not to do that to the next generation, right? And then each one and has to kind of reckon with that by the end. I'm probably giving away a lot of this, but there's lots of other stuff happening in that I'm not gonna tell you. There's lots of horror movie. Sam Raimi, I was talking about Multiverse of Madness, and my favorite thing about that is Sam Raimi made it, and it's Terminator references and horror movie references and Ash and the Evil Dead references. But there's lots of other horror movie stuff going on that I'm not going to talk about. But that was like some of the really good aspects of it, I thought, and it's like so true. It's like so applicable. But anyways, I haven't even talked about the Taiwan stuff, and I gotta go soon. I'm having a panel in about 2 hours, so I gotta move it. But anyways, so since we went over that, I'm glad that Sandra Oh, who is Korean, actually got to. The thing I like about this movie is at least it does. It's not like I often say, like Kim's Convenience is a movie. White Western Canadians writing Asian characters from a white perspective to laugh at them. I've talked about Kim Kardashian several times as one show that's like that's not good, right? I just had by the way, just a quick shout out to Professor Flowers. Professor Flowers and I did our Stranger Things. Lua and I and Riendes also. We did our Stranger Things panel yesterday. If you missed it, you can check that out. That wasn't on this channel. That was on. We did Stranger Things, anti-blackness and anti-communism in Stranger Things, and the good, the bad, and the anti-communist. We did all three. So if you want to check that out, we did that yesterday, and soon I will be doing and I also dressed up like Eddie. Check this out. I'm like Indigenous Eddie with a Doom 1.44 megabyte floppy disk patch made of felt. Holly got that. Credit to Holly for this vest, by the way. So, but if you want to hear a commentary about Stranger Things, anti-blackness, and anti-communism, you can watch this one from yesterday. And today I'm going to be doing another panel. Just a quick little ads break between me opening and closing my mouth about things. We're going to be doing a panel on where the hell did I put it? U.S. Patriot Socialism. We're going to be doing a panel on U.S. Patriot Socialism, defeatism, orgs allowing abuse and bigotry, and leftists trying to tear down left orgs doing actual work. Today at 2 Eastern time. I think, unfortunately, I got the time slightly incorrect. I apologize. So we might not have Danny, but we might have other people. There's a few other people that might be here. It depends on how everybody's schedule works out. But Luna, Bothered Boy, Professor Flowers will be back. Nigel Cherion, I believe, is a member was a former member or an organizer around the Communist Party of Canada, and who's going to comment on that, which is its own thing. And we're going to talk about. Usually, it's a lot of online, although not all of them. Left, mostly dudes, upset that Starbucks workers are unionizing, saying that they're not real workers. Service industry workers are not real workers. Women coded jobs, like I talked about that a few streams ago. The patriarchy is about splitting it into across race, working class across race, or across gender lines, and calling women's jobs like teachers, nurses, and Starbucks coffee pourers and restaurant workers are not real workers, and screw your unions. And there's a lot of bullshit going on. So we're going to talk about all that stuff today on Luna's channel. And that's one of the many things I'm doing all the time. You see how busy I am? That's the Asian tiger mom in my head that's just going, Silver Spook, you got to do another 25 things today. Otherwise, how are we going to live in a McMansion in Orange County with all the money that you've made because you work 25,000 hours a day? No, I'm just kidding. That's not what I'm thinking. I'm just Silver Spook. Actually, give me 1 second. I'm gonna take a real quick break and check out this. Speaking of we're gonna get to the Asian experience, but let's look at a trailer for a game that's about starring Luna Oi, and also is about the Western trauma of the Asian people of the Earth. And then we're gonna come back and we'll talk more about Taiwan specifically. You're not gonna want to miss that one. You're gonna want to see me dunk all over Nancy Pelosi. Okay.
18th U.S. invades Vietnam to prevent the spread of communism. The Americans bombed them into the Stone Age. Hundreds of thousands die. But the Vietnamese fight back with all their might.
Time to kick some capitalist colonizer butts! I'll be back with my tank. Ouch! Cheese butter scratch!
Your little commie village is about to be burned down.
You Western clowns are being...
There is no alternative to capitalism. Resistance is futile.
I've got your alternative right here, Your Majesty. We kick your money-grubbing colonizer butts out and build socialism.
2 men enter. No one leaves capitalism.
You made a big mistake coming to Vietnam, you spoil rich royal.
Starring Luna Oi, with Ophidian the Cobra and Kate Nix. The Decolonators.
Anyways, I'm sorry. I said 2 p.m. Eastern. It's 8 p.m. Eastern. I'm bad with the time stuff, man. It's we're gonna be having the panel today. Thanks, Holly, for clarifying. 8 p.m. Eastern today. 8 p.m. Eastern at or 2 p.m. Hawaii time, because I'm in Hawaii, right? So I apologize for that. That will be on the Luna Oi channel. Okay, I think the flyer said the right time and I said the wrong time. Gosh, when I talk too fast and I'm doing, that's one thing I do doing too many things everywhere all at once, too fast. You know, you unwind like 55 million tangents throughout the multiverse. You end up missing a couple of the details, like what time zone were you talking about? So 8 p.m. Eastern time. I'm sorry about that. YouTube.com/LunaOi or Twitch LunaOi. But I think YouTube probably wants me to say the other one. Anyways, so look out for that. Where was I going with this? Okay, so now we've talked about Umma. I gotta get out of here very soon, so I gotta blast through this. But let's talk about what Americans don't understand about Taiwan. Okay, I feel like I've covered. I don't have time to go through. I can't. This again, 2/3 of the world is Asia, so I can't even pretend like I could talk about all those people. There's no possible way, right? They deserve much more than that. They've had paper for 20 times longer than the West, China specifically. So they have way more history to talk about, actual history to talk about. In their pinky, they have more education in their pinky than the entire European and Western world has in their so-called museums that are all plundered Asian, African, Turtle Island, and Pacific relics and actual knowledge. And I made an album. I have a song in that specifically about that called Founding Ancestors, which is all about the world's colonized peoples that are going to get our credit, knowledge, technological advancements, actual advanced civilizations, and also repatriation of this $450 trillion of stolen wealth. Anyways, but so Asia's a huge place. So I can't talk about all of it, obviously. And I know I got to paint with big brushes. But there are many similarities between all these places. There are internal, there's absolutely internal fights. And number one is I know there's Ryukyuan or Luchuan or Shimanchu. I was just talking to Akemi, who is a good friend and is also a Okinawan or Luchuan or Ryukyuan. They're actually internally discussing like what the term best to describe them, right? And it's not even internally, even in those islands, it's the disagreements there about what exactly they're called. But anyways, internally the Japanese, of course, have oppressed the indigenous people there in Okinawa, along with the United States and countless other people. And so inside of Asia, it's absolutely not a monolith, and that's kind of my point, right? That's one of the horrors, is just being lumped into this. You're all just Asian. Any dumpling, that's just Asian. Any kind of noodle, that's European, Italian. When we're trying to fold Italian Catholics into the U.S. empire, and it's a good thing. But then noodles are cheap and bad when they come from China, but tastes better, as is admitted by Peacemaker's dad in Peacemaker, the Nazi. But anyways, so this fucked up thing where it's like you actually are cooking and making food, doing laundry, like actually better at so many things, overrepresented actually in tech and in business and in finance and in medical science, science, technology, engineering, math, across the board, all those things, excelling, but being paid. Asians are paid like 1/3 or less often for the same level of job. It's like, women are paid like 70% or less in jobs. The anti-Asianness and the anti-women stuff, right? It's part and parcel of interlocking systems of hierarchical, patriarchal interlocking systems of oppression that sometimes compete, but altogether self-reinforce to maintain unequal structures and prevent revolutionary, actual concrete change. So, this experience is not altogether. So we're gonna paint with some broad brushes, but and I can't talk about everyone. If you want to learn about decolonizers, Vietnam, you know what you can do? You just watch. We do multiple Asia Pacific panels with lots of people from China, from Vietnam, from Korea, from all over the place. There's been at least two from world. I know there's actually 3 or 4 Asian and Pacific Silver Spook panels with people from all around the world. And that's just the beginning, Like I don't have a long enough lifespan to learn all of this stuff. But anyway, I'll stop preambling and move forward. So in this moment, right? Because in America, it's a New York minute, and what's happening now, right? In the next 140 seconds, and then we're gonna change the topic and then rewrite history. But right now, and make it, and start a new war based on weapons of mass destruction or yellow cake or some bullshit chemical weapon story. But in this moment's bullshit story is that the United States has to defend Taiwan from China, where of course Taiwan is part of China, but there's no right. It's my Silver Spook refrain. There's no education in the West. There's no information in the West. So, but in this moment, right, Nancy Pelosi is currently, like, I'm trying to find the most recent thing, right? If you type Taiwan in, it's really heating up. Like Lee Camp and Redacted Tonight was just talking about it. Danny Haifeng's talking about Nancy Pelosi's Taiwan stun is a blue MAGA on steroids. There's no gridlock between the Democrats and Republicans when it comes to escalating militarism against China. Speaking of Danny, war is a possibility. This is very dangerous, not needed. Even like Ro Khanna on Taiwan, right? Ro Khanna is like progressive, like squadish member, right? He's on the left of U.S. politics. Ro Khanna came out and said like, what did he actually say about Taiwan? Let's see, Ro Khanna, Taiwan. So I don't want to mistake. In the Situation Room, even Wolf Blitzer was like, "Whoa, what are you saying, bro?" Economic development of Taiwan is happening. Is doing the job. We have to send Nancy over there to put China back in its place. Is basically what he said. America is the greatest country in the world, and we have to get over there and push and show China that you can't push us around. We're gonna send people wherever we feel like it. It's just the most ridiculous stuff, but America, it's just a clown show. It's not really a country. Anyways, but I'll stop insulting most of my audience now. Let's talk about what Americans don't understand about Taiwan, though. So this is not just about me dunking on people who don't understand things. It's not really anyone's fault. As somebody, as I said, I was socialized as an American, so I understand what it is to like not understand lots of things, right? And then be told, oh, I have the inside information that's gonna make everything make sense, but it's actually another charlatan, it's just a long, infinite layered cake of charlatan bullshit, tiramisu, not particularly flavorful. But anyways, so let's move on to the Taiwan. So, if you don't understand about Taiwan specifically, here is a thread from a native. Because I said, I'm a complicated person because the world is complicated and I'm of the world, but also I'm from Hawaii, which is in the Asia and Pacific region, and it's complicated, but I'm Asian and Pacific Islander, both in ancestry, raised under U.S. American capitalist culture, as I said, but trying my absolute best to rebuild, undo, and actually educate for the first time, because I went to a lot of schools in America, but I was never educated. I was only brain poisoned, conditioned, and indoctrinated, right, into Western lies and imperialism and capitalism and racism and all this other shit. So, but as an indigenous person of Hawaii, right, this is a thread about this specifically, right? Because a lot of people have been saying to me, to my face, they've been like, Silver Spook, you have to support Taiwan and the United States helping Taiwan against the Chinese aggression, and they're trying to like colonizer explain, like white people are trying to explain to me how to be a native Hawaiian. You are a Hawaiian and you're related to the Taiwanese people because I read that in a book somewhere written by a white guy that's full of lies. And I'm a white person lecturing you, the native Hawaiian, about you are not a good native Hawaiian unless you support Taiwan because they're related to you and America is going to help you and Taiwan. So you have to sit down and love America inside of Hawaii, because look at how much freedom and democracy all that jet fuel is bringing you, and culture. Anyway, you know, and you also have to, as a Hawaiian indigenous person, you have to support the liberation of Hawaii with the U.S.'s help by making them civilized, making us civilized. You have to love America, and you have to love America helping Taiwan because they're your relative. And it's amazing how many people, they're ready to hear some stuff about Hawaii, but when I start talking about people that are related to me in Asia, they're like, I'm a white leftist that knows all about Asia and Hawaii, and I'm gonna explain to you. I'm gonna white man or white whatever. I'm gonna West-splain to you, native Hawaiian, how to be a Hawaiian. That's amazing stuff, man. Colonizer explain, like, yeah, exactly, big deal. Okay, so, but you know, so let's you know, this is not super long, I promise. If you want a long one, listen to Carl. Carl Jha is super in depth and just one of 1.4 billion people that are way more educated than anyone in the West will ever be, unfortunately. But Carl has a video about Taiwan specifically that's it's connected in this thread. So if you want to learn more about that, but it's important now because there's a dangerous situation in Taiwan that is threatening U.S.-China possibly kinetic war. You know, not good stuff. I mean, it is the number. Actually, really, I would say it's like one of the number one things is to stop this. If you're in the military, if you're in the U.S. government anywhere, if you're anywhere in there, throw yourself on the gears. Do not go along with any program to do any firing or shooting anywhere at or near anything Chinese. Okay, help us stop anything terrible from happening because complete sociopathic, horrible people like Nancy Pelosi want to make some political points. I don't know what she's trying to do there. With her speaker, you know, with her all of her millions of dollars. Just sit down and eat some Rocky Road in your bunker, Nancy. Okay, in your COVID bunker with your billions of dollars. Just sit down and open up a cold one with Mike Pompeo and all your friends in the neocons, and just chill out. Why you gotta fly in planes into China? Anyways, okay, so let's get to this though. I'm gonna stop stalling. We indigenous people of Hawaii, Taiwan, New Zealand, all the way to Madagascar share common origin, language, and master wayfinding, or also known as ho'okele in Hawaiian. Nearly wiped out during Western colonization, my Hawaiian language and culture was banned by the U.S. and the Dutch subjugated Taiwan. So the term Austronesian comes from the Greek and Latin meaning Southern Islanders. Austronesian family of languages. So Hawaiians and Taiwan, the indigenous people of Taiwan, are the people that have been there for thousands and thousands of years. And the word indigenous is a complicated word itself, but the people that have been there for a long period of time, and particularly that were then impacted by colonization and suppression. The Austronesian family of languages extends from Taiwan to Madagascar to Rapa Nui, includes over 1,000 related languages, and is spoken by 5% of the world's population. The largest Austronesian language in terms of speakers are Javanese, Bahasa Indonesia, Malaysia, Tagalog, Bisaya, that's in the Philippines, Cebuano, and Malagasy. The dominant theory is the ancient Proto-Austronesian language began somewhere in Taiwan 4,000 years ago, and its speakers spread throughout the Pacific. So this is a deep one to go into, but the migrations of peoples across the Pacific, as we were master navigators and could sail thousands and thousands of miles, as is alluded to in Moana, not really explained. Using star navigation, ocean wave current swells, and the coloration of the undersides of clouds and flora and fauna patterns of bird patterns, we were able to navigate the entire Earth. Actually, all 7 continents were reached by Austronesians, our people. Africa, all the way to Madagascar, right? So Africa, all of the Pacific, all of the Indian Ocean, Asia, Turtle Island. Australia, obviously, we reached basically everywhere, using stars and double hull canoes. We call va'a or vaka. In Aotearoa, New Zealand, it's the word is vaka. In Hawaii, it's va'a. But anyways, so long story short, but we came from Taiwan is the important point, right? And the boundaries of Micronesia, Melanesia, Polynesia, don't actually fit linguistic groups. These are kind of Western. Micronesia means the small people. The Melanesia is the more melanated place, the darker place. Polynesia is the so these exist, and they've been used in the English and in European languages in academic senses. But really, the Pacific peoples in what's called in Austronesian is of course another Western world, but it's the language family actually extends throughout the entirety of the Pacific. The boundaries, anyways, but this is a lot of, I'm going to move forward into Taiwan. So because we speak related languages, there's a tendency that we have some related deep culture and ancestral memories embedded in our vocabulary and traditions. We also share DNA markers that confirm the greatness of the skills of our navigator ancestors. So some people like to say that, well, Hawaiians didn't, the Pacific peoples never got to South America and brought the sweet potato back. It's absolute nonsense, because number one, we have carbon dating and geological evidence and soil evidence that shows that the sweet potato was in the Pacific, right? It's ridiculous to even think about. If you could find a tiny island that's like a half a mile wide in an ocean that's 1/3 of the Earth's surface and come back to it routinely, there's no way that you're not, and you're sailing thousands of miles, right? There's no way that you're not going to find an entire continent. It's just ridiculous if you just thought about it and you weren't racist, like a lot of academia in the West, right? Including Scandinavians like Thor Heyerdahl, who made Kon-Tiki, a Scandinavian who tried to prove that Pacific people were savage backwards people who got lost on logs, not master navigators. But anyways, that's a long discussion. But we did originate from Taiwan. So I'm going a little more into this, even though it's a lot of wall of text. But the Taiwanese people, the indigenous people of Taiwan, there's multiple tribes. Sadly, a lot of them are not with us anymore. The Hakka people. There's a movie, Warriors of the Rainbow, that is about Warriors of the Rainbow is a movie. I brought it up before on the stream. That's about the indigenous people of Taiwan. You look at them. They the way they speak, it resembles so much. It sounds like Samoan to me when they talk. The inflections and the intonations. The indigenous people of Taiwan are relatives of the indigenous peoples of the Pacific, like Native Hawaiians, Maori, Samoan, right, etc. Including also Indonesia, Philippines. Those are the two together. If you put Indonesia and the Philippines together, it's more people than all of the United States and Canada. The Austronesians outnumber actually all of the settler white countries. So it's also that. But so my point is that when people talk about indigenous people in Taiwan, right? Some people will lecture me, right? Again, like you Westerners will be like, Silver Spook, you're an indigenous person. You have to support the indigenous people of Taiwan. Well, yes, I know that. There are indigenous people of Taiwan. Most of you wiped them out. You Europeans, you massacred them and you enslaved them and you killed them. And then your Japanese allies did some more killing. And then America took the whole fucking island and made it a military imperial outpost and abused the shit out of them. And backed fascists and capitalists in Taiwan. And backed the KMT. And all kind of horrible forces. So I do support the indigenous people of Taiwan. Right? Not being blown up by you and used as an unsinkable aircraft carrier. So that's the thing that really frustrates me is people say, Silver Spook, you have to support the liberation of Taiwan. I don't have to support the right-wing separatist landlord class represented by Tsai Ing-wen that the United States neocons like Nancy Pelosi are going to go visit right now. Because that's not indigenous people to Taiwan. They're actually the people that sold out Taiwan that the U.S. is supporting and funding and arming. Right? Like the Azov Nazis. Or East Turkestan Islamic movement radicals that cut off the heads of people in Xinjiang, right? But that's what you have to support the indigenous ETIM movement, decolonizing China, right? Those are the far right. That's like saying we have to support ISIS because they're decolonizing the Middle East. You have to support the KKK because they're decolonizing America. That's like when you say you have to support the U.S. backing Taiwan. It's like saying we have to support the Ku Klux Klan. And we have to support MAGA decolonizing America because they're the separate. We have to support far right fascist extremists in the United States, right? Like the "Don't Tread on Me" libertarians, because that's decolonizing the United States, right? And if you said that to an American, they'd be like, I don't know what to say, because actually I kind of like colonization. I don't know, but KKK might be bad, but am I a racist? And then they have a emotional existential crisis because they realize that their fucking entire existence is racist. But anyways, there is a hit. There are an indigenous people. So just to make it really clear, there are an indigenous people of Taiwan. There are Austronesian people. They are related to Native Hawaiians, right? This is a map of some of the places. So from Taiwan, right, you have diaspora through the Western Malayo-Polynesian region, Madagascar, right? That's Africa. That's right off the coast of Africa. There, where languages in the Austronesian family are spoken still to this day. Sumatra, Java, Borneo, Philippines, Guam, Indonesia, all the way down to New Zealand, which is where Taika Waititi is from, of course, in Easter Island or Rapa Nui, one of the most geographically isolated places in the world. Hawaii is very isolated, but it's an archipelago, large and easier to find. Rapa Nui is very small and much more difficult to find. Anyways, but Maopiailug, this is one of, I say, this is a huge brush I'm painting with. So I know internally between Hawaiians and our Western neighbors, Hawaiians should give credit to Maopiailug and also the people of Satawa who in their own right were and are and continue to be great navigators. And it is the, like, it actually just comes back to that intergenerational trauma, the trauma of being colonized an empire sows the seeds of the dark tree of recolonization, and you become the stormtrooper. Like I always say, I'm half stormtrooper, because right, it's part of the nature of being hurt by these things. And so in the same way that Sandra Oh's mother suffers trauma under colonization or the colonial world, and then re-traumatizes the daughter, and the daughter is re-traumatizing the granddaughter. So similarly, Hawaiians should give credit to Maopiailug, and not just because there's some lack of it's a long story, but basically like let's just say like there should be more cooperation and mutual benefit between Hawaii and a lot of the rest of Polynesia. But colonization and the U.S. foothold in Hawaii, in a ridiculous, unnecessary global nuclear war against China is what's pulling Hawaiians away from their relatives, and sadly in a lot of sad, messed up ways. But anyway, back to this topic though. Maopiailug was one of the last, or is one of the great navigators of the area of Micronesia and of Satawa that helped Hawaiians to rediscover what they had lost, what we had lost, right? And since then we have had more voyages and rekindling the nearly destroyed in the colonization process, the master wayfinding that we had that led us to all these places across the world, right? Almost across the entire earth, right? To reach every continent. So anyways, here is a picture of the indigenous people of Taiwan. So if you wanted to know, they have a specific style of dress and of wear and of clothing. And it's not, of course, like there's no like 1-to-1, but there are certain patterns that you can see that resemble things in parts of Polynesia, Hawaii, Micronesia, Marshall Islands, and of course, and they're also related to Asia. They're also related to the peoples in Ryukyu or Luchu or what's called Okinawa, but it's also called Ryukyu Luchu region. And Taiwan is right next to that region, by the way. Taiwan is the island that is less than 50 miles from the closest Okinawan island, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken. So the Dutch brutal. So okay, let me get to the point. I'm like spending too much time on digressions. But nearly wiped out during Western colonization, my Hawaiian language and culture was banned by the United States, and the Dutch subjugated Taiwan. So that's my point, is that we share a lot. We share much history. In fact, the history of Hawaii is almost the same as Taiwan in that sense, right? The Dutch brutally massacred both the indigenous and the Han Chinese in Taiwan and referred to the Chinese oppressed labor as worker bees producing their honey. So by the European records, the Dutch, there were 2,000 to 2,500, maybe 4,000 Chinese, Han Chinese, right? Who they had not been in Taiwan for 4,000 plus years. By some estimates, 30,000 plus years there had been people on Taiwan. So the Han Chinese were not indigenous to Taiwan in the sense of being there for thousands of years, but the Han Chinese for many centuries, over 4 centuries, right? 7 plus centuries, the Chinese have their own records. The Chinese had a small outpost and were trading with the indigenous people, the Austronesian people on Taiwan, right? And it was a peaceful relationship. And actually, in Warriors of the Rainbow, the indigenous Hakka people of Taiwan, they're fighting the Japanese in this. The Japanese are the colonizers in this one, but the Taiwanese indigenous people explicitly and very specifically say, do not harm the Han Chinese, because the Han Chinese is not our colonizer. That's made very clear in this movie. They say, like, he's just a traitor. You don't kill him. Don't kill him. Don't kill him. You're killing the Japanese colonizers. Where they have this actual colonizer versus colonized fight. But don't touch the Han Chinese, because he's not. He's just here to trade. Right? He was selling wares. He's selling like clothes and foods and beverages and stuff, right? And some of the younger hotheads are like, oh, we gotta kill everyone. They're like, no, and then the leader's like, no, don't kill him, because that's not what. Anyway, so there is a history. So when people say China is colonizing Taiwan, this is Western projection. This is Western guilt. This is Asian anti-Asian racism. This is ignorance of 2/3 of the earth, that is Asia. And anyways, so there was a colonizer in Taiwan, but it was the Dutch who brutally massacred both the indigenous and Han Chinese in Taiwan, referred to the Chinese oppressed labor as worker bees producing their honey. And so this is an image of 18th century painting of a sugar plantation on Taiwan, where the Dutch famously said, Taiwan is a land of milk and honey, and the Chinese are worker bees. The exploitation of the Chinese labor was so harsh, it sparked several rebellions by the Chinese migrants on the islands. The Chinese that were actually brought there by the Dutch. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but you know how, like, black slaves were brought by Europeans to places like Haiti, South America, and North America as oppressed labor, right, on indigenous land, to make a lot of money and wealth and prosperity for Europeans specifically. You remember that? Do you remember that, or do they not teach you that in the U.S. history books? Taiwan is actually it's a very America story. Indigenous territory, right? Dutch instead of the Anglo-Saxons, right? And the Dutch actually participating in the slave trade too, but instead of the Pilgrims and the Mayflower and the white British settlers showing up massacring indigenous people and having black slaves, the Dutch showed up, massacred indigenous Taiwanese people, and then brought Chinese slaves. And massacred the Chinese workers when they asked for anything. They just said, shut up, and if you don't stop asking, if you don't get back to work on the sugar plantation instead of tobacco or whatever else. But but you see this colonial era story repeats itself. Indigenous stolen land, stolen people, oppressed, violently put down when asking for even an inch of quality of life. So really, I mean, if you are a black person or a non-white person in the United States, if you're an indigenous person in the United States, right, you should know that the history of Taiwan is the indigenous people of Taiwan and the Chinese people of Taiwan, the Chinese people that are on Taiwan, share a history of indigenous stolen land and stolen people for white capitalist profit with you. So you you have to look in there. So we're gonna get through that. I'm sorry I'm taking too much time, but I really want to nail that in, because people don't know shit about Taiwan, and you should know this, right? I should know this. I'm not saying you should know this because you're bad, you don't know it. I didn't know this until very recently. I should have known this a long time ago. I am related to the indigenous people of Taiwan, but I didn't know it until, like, I was listening to Carl fucking Jha. That's why I was like, you gotta listen to Asians, man. I mean, you gotta listen to Asians from Asia that like the based fucking parties, because that's why I learned this. I didn't learn this anywhere in the West. I didn't even learn this in the Western left. It took like going all the way to going all the way to freaking a Chinese person that learned to speak English and now lives in Indonesia, actually, Carl, going like, no, this is the actual history. Anyways, so, but it's very similar history. So in Hawaii, similar, but so as I said, in Taiwan, there was an exploited class on stolen indigenous land, right? And some of them, some of it's not stolen, some of it was like people were suffering, but sometimes it was brought over. The Europeans of all stripes, Portuguese, British, Americans, Shanghai, the word Shanghaied, it means drug someone, put them on a boat, and then when they get off of the boat, they're doing oppressed labor. I mean, stealing people and moving them around the planet. That's what look at the British, what they did. Look at the French in Vietnam. Look at the British in China. Who built the railroads in Canada and the United States? Who built the West Coast? Right? Stolen people on stolen land again. So, yeah. So this is the reality. So if you want to talk about, so if anybody says, so you have to support the liberation of Taiwan, of the indigenous people of Taiwan, decolonizing, right? Number one, most indigenous people have been slaughtered. Number two, the U.S. and the U.S. backed and Western backed forces are not liberators in Taiwan or anywhere. You're gonna hear that a lot now, especially in the next few days. You've been hearing this already. You can hear it a lot. Taiwan had fucking 350,000 tweets today. It was like blowing the charts off. You're gonna hear a lot of this bullshit right now. You just remember that's not the reality. If there was a colonizer, it was the Dutch. It was later the Japanese, and it was the Americans, and then it was the U.S. backed right wing like Tsai Ing-wen. It was the KMT and these other forces on Taiwan. As an indigenous Austronesian person, you have my permission to give the middle finger to any of these freaking Westerners talking about decolonizing Taiwan from the Chinese. Anyways, if anything, the Chinese were exploited and oppressed on Taiwan. This again, right? It'd be like telling a black person in the United States. You have to help Donald Trump and MAGA decolonize America from you, right? Because if you're black, you were brought, many of the black population, right, brought to the United States for oppressed labor, right? So when you say we have to support liberating Taiwan from the Chinese, it's like saying we have to liberate America from African people. How nonsensical is this, right? How absolutely you have to Black Lives Matter is colonizing America. That's equivalent when you say we have to liberate Taiwan from China. You see how ridiculous this is? This is off the charts, but only in the West where you can just bullshit all your freaking every orifice all day long and get away with it, right? Can this be common sense? So anyways, but very upsetting. I'm not being as calm as I wanted to be. It's 12:37. Let's move. In Hawaii, okay, so in Taiwan, there was Han Chinese in Taiwan. They referred to the Chinese oppressed labor as worker bees producing their honey. The Dutch openly said this. Okay, they're not even hiding this stuff. If you had a history book with any kind of history in it, you could easily find this stuff out. Anyways, in Hawaii, just selective memory and selective editing of history books and everything in the West. In Hawaii, similar white oligarch-run sugar plantations exploited Hawaiian and Asian coolies for capitalist profit. So not only is this similar to the history of white colonization and capitalist colonization in the United States, this is also the same as Hawaii. In fact, even similar because Hawaii is even closer because Hawaii is an Austronesian indigenous people, Native Hawaiians like myself, right? Like the Austronesian Taiwanese people, indigenous people. Hawaii also, right, had a variety of Asians brought. Some of them were migrating and they cooperated with the Hawaiians, like the Han Chinese that were cooperating with the Taiwanese indigenous, right? Just trading for mutual win-win benefit. And Hawaiians and Asians were cooperating. And then the United States showed up, right? And the Euro capitalists, white oligarchs showed up. And they subjugated the Native Hawaiians, our people, banned our language, banned our culture, right? Got rid of our cooperative Aloha Hui system and our advanced healthcare system, right? And they took Hawaiian land and they put Asian Austronesian land, and then they put oppressed Asian labor on it. It's the sugar plantations and Mr. Dole murder and genocide, United Fruit Company, fucking Dole Pineapple, Dole United Fruit Company, governor of Hawaii, right? Are you upset by anything that's happened in South America? Do you know anything about the United Fruit Company? Same shit happened in Hawaii. But Asians, Chinese, oppressed labor, right? Stolen people on stolen Hawaiian land. Stolen indigenous land. But in Hawaii, it's Austronesian indigenous people and Chinese people, right? So again, you see the same fucking story. And who's doing the colonizing? Who's doing the oppression? Who is the people that needs the indigenous and the oppressed labor needs liberation from? Is it the Hawaiian oligarchs? Is it the Chinese oligarchs? Right? Is the Chinese subjugating the Hawaiians and enslaving them and looking down on them and sipping the tea and kicking all the Hawaiians in the ass as the Hawaiians are making Chinese rice fields work for $0 an hour or pennies? Is it the Hawaiians enslaving the Chinese in Hawaii? No. It's the United States. It's the sons of the missionaries of Puritan and Calvinists who showed up from the East Coast of the United States, collaborating with Mr. McKinley, President of the United States, and Mr. Dole and Mr. United Fruit Company, right? It's white oligarchic colonizer capitalism again. And, I know this hurts to hear if you're like a white person. I'm sorry, but this is not like you're evil because of that. But like, this is just a pattern, and this is just historical realities, right? And there were not to be clear, every person that showed up that was from Europe was doing all the bad stuff because, of course, the Japanese, and there were elements that were collaborating, right, in different ways in different times. But the overarching narrative, right, remains. The subsequent occupation of Hawaii and the proclamation of what called itself a republic, which in fact, this is the Republic of Hawaii after the U.S. illegal overthrow and illegal occupation of Hawaii in the 1890s. The republic was in fact a plutarchy or plutocracy or an oligarchy dedicated to plunder, an ethno-class system. Some have called it plantation feudalism. Again, feudalism, capitalism, right? These systems blend into each other in many ways. The PG, a provisional and protectorate government, and the republic sought to replace, like the Republic of China, the ROC, or especially the later one, the one that the Taiwanese separatists that love Donald Trump, ROC versus the PRC, the Republic of, I think this is a Republic of Korea, if I'm not mistaken. There's lots of republics all over Asia and Pacific region that are not so republic-y, they're not so democratic, actually, the U.S. backed. So the republic that was a racist plutocracy sought to replace the developing class and Hawaiian national consciousness. So again, there's nationalism, but nationalism can be toxic. But you need to understand yourself as a nation, and as a people, as cultures, right, that have differences internally, but also a nation that's also conscious of capitalism and class struggle, which Hawaii had and it was developing. Right, I have this long thread about my thread I always go through about the Hawaii's universal healthcare system, building socialism, mass transit, all these things. I'm going to get to that later. So Hawaiian class and national consciousness that was of a was destroyed in favor by the U.S. occupation of a strictly ethnic consciousness while trying to enforce Anglo-American values, minus the democratic ones, of course. Not that America has any democracy, even inside of America, but 99% of all policy is dictated by whatever has the most billionaires and millionaires behind it. Even Ash and Ivy League institutes this scientific studies on this. But anyways, the plantation owners began in Hawaii allowing for cultural groups to be organized on the plantation and would later use these organizations against unions. Very important. The racism, very important for patriot socialists today, and people who say, let's talk about class and let's not deal with race, misogyny, and LGBTQ and homophobia, right? No. I go off on this shit all the time. You have to address all of these contradictions and secondary contradictions all together. And Hawaii is just one of the many examples, right, where racial differences were used to divide and break up the working classes. And Hawaii... The capitalists, they did, it worked really well to break up the black and white and Asian working classes in America, and the women and for men, and to stop any actual revolutionary change to build socialism in the United States. Let's repeat that in Hawaii, but with inserting racism into my family still has this in them. My Asian and Hawaiian, the Asians in my family, they go, oh, you can't trust those Hawaiians. They're all overlording, brutish, nasty people, and then some of the Hawaiians would be like, oh, those stingy Chinese over there, we can't trust them. And where are you getting all these things? I don't know. It was just like taught to us in school. Which school? The school when the U.S. illegal occupation showed up and wrote all your textbooks? Oh yeah, I guess it was just kind of fed to us by our white oligarchic textbook writers, news and newspaper writers. And no, nobody actually has that. Too few people have the realization that all of this has been engineered to maintain capital. Anyways, to maintain capitalism. In a different place, similar story, right? So the plantation owners began allowing cultural groups to be organized, and they would later, these cultural groups, which were intentionally splintered and inter-ethnic divisions were intentionally fostered to be used against unions specifically, so that workers could not form collective power in Hawaii. When the sugar plantations began in the 1860s, plantations operated as towns. Also, the universal healthcare system. When was the world pop quiz? When was the world's first universal healthcare system? 1859, Hawaii. Emma Kalani Kamaka Kaleleo Nalani Naearuk led on foot a campaign to raise money for Queen's medical system, the world's first free of charge free healthcare system, predating any Western European universal healthcare system by 100 years. And still, they're not really universal because it's still denied quality care to people based on race, including in Europe. So in the 1860s, the plantation operated as towns in the sovereign Hawaii. Again, sovereign socialist Hawaii. After the U.S. illegal occupation, plantation owners enforced ethnic divisions by formally dividing up living quarters into ethnic camps. The system would be refined for the next 100 years. So again, so Hawaii's oppression is again, Hawaii history and Taiwan history so similar in that regards, right? Taiwan and Hawaii share a history of colonial occupation, ghettoization of native people as rich Westerners enjoyed paradise, gas stations, imperial outposts, and military bases to plunder Asia. General MacArthur called Taiwan an unsinkable aircraft carrier, and President McKinley of the United States said, "We need Hawaii to get our share of China." So, again, this is Mr. Dole, who was the governor of Hawaii. The pineapple on a pizza, the Hawaiian pizza. That was a Canadian settler guy who wanted to sell more pineapples on pizza, made by Mr. Dole, who was one of the backers of the overthrow of our sovereign socialist country with the help of the U.S. military, the USS Boston specifically at Pearl Harbor. So Mr. Dole made ads like this in the 20th century about the perfect servant living in Honolulu. All of these good little racially divided, ununionized by inserted racism, Filipino, Hawaiian, and Chinese little Asian and Pacific workers, and you can come enjoy great workers, great little slaves in Hawaii, in Honolulu, that I've overthrown for my personal benefit as a United Fruit Company man. General MacArthur, this is him specifically, walking around in Taiwan, referring to it as an unsinkable aircraft carrier, as he was trumpeting the offensive nature of the strategies used to contain communism, right? That's why I made the colonizers, right, in that video game. The United States invades Vietnam to do what? What are they? They invaded Vietnam because they like pho? Are they invading Vietnam because they care about the Vietnamese people? No. The United States invades Vietnam to prevent the spread of communism. And MacArthur, in the same time period, was referring to Taiwan as an unsinkable aircraft carrier. You know what's funny? If you Google that right now, what is the Wall Street Journal, right? What is the Wall Street Journal? There was this article that used that same phrase, right? Taiwan, the unsinkable aircraft carrier sails again. In response to the Chinese, because there were Americans that were referring to Taiwan. China could use Taiwan as an unsinkable aircraft carrier. I think it was Biden himself said that, right? And it was like, that's your imperial U.S. anti-communist phrase. Don't you remember this? No, they don't remember that because there's no history in the West. But MacArthur specifically referred to Taiwan as an unsinkable aircraft carrier because Taiwan is mere 100 or so miles off of the coast of China. It's like less than 1,000 miles from Beijing. Put your ICBM on Taiwan, you aim it at Beijing. You blow up all the communists, right? So MacArthur specifically said he was trumpeting an offensive nature. The United States was using Taiwan as a important military outpost to put aircraft like jets, right? Like F-16s, right? Like F-22s, and other bombing apparatus that could be used, a military apparatus that could be used as a containment policy in Asia to wall off communism, thus denying it room to emanate outward from the revolutionary hub of Beijing. So remember, why is the U.S. in Taiwan? Is the U.S. in Taiwan to liberate the Chinese people or the Taiwanese people? Was the U.S. in Vietnam for the fall? No, they were there to massacre the Vietnamese people and reinstate colonial capitalism. And they killed 1 million Vietnamese people plus, bombed that place to the Stone Age, and all the horrors. American soldiers know this. But but nobody listened to the ones coming back, like all the actual Rambos. The United States was never in Taiwan to help anyone in Taiwan, Chinese, indigenous. The only people the U.S. was in Taiwan to help were fascists and imperialists like the current separatist far-right leader, Tsai Ing-wen, who applauded for Donald Trump, the right-wing capitalist descendant of a wealthy business family who collaborated with the Japanese colonization. Tsai Ing-wen, that's who Nancy Pelosi is to visit, by the way, right? The United States has never and is not in Taiwan to help anyone there. They're there to continue to attempt to prevent the spread of communism at the expense of the lives of the Taiwanese people, the independence of the Taiwanese people, the democracy of the Taiwanese people that is being armed. They said nobody in Taiwan can ever get elected if they don't kowtow to Western American policy. So the United States, Westerners massacred most of the indigenous people and the Japanese finished off most of the rest. And then America showed up to back fascists on Taiwan, including the ROC in the fight between fascism and what? Oh, communism. That was headquartered where? In Beijing. The United States does not care about anyone in Taiwan, just like they don't care about any Native Hawaiians. They don't even care about their own troops in Hawaii that are all dying, drinking gallons of jet fuel right now, and throwing up their insides and going into comas, and their children have rashes all over the body. The United States is not anywhere militarily, sanctions-wise, financially. It is nowhere for anyone but the richest and the most racist people of this planet, period. If you don't understand that, you are just mass lied to, or you are fascist, or an imperialist capitalist, garbage person, period. So you should not support anything. And if anybody says anything about Taiwan, you immediately point them to my thread and say, the indigenous relatives of the indigenous people of Taiwan say, get the fucking United States and all of its allies the fuck out of Taiwan, period. None of this, we're going to liberate Taiwan, protect them from Chinese aggression. Okay. Anyways, but I feel like I had to say that very overtly. So fuck General MacArthur also. Also fuck this guy. We must have Hawaii to get our share of China. And fuck these British assholes in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is I could do infinite streams just on Hong Kong. Every island in the entire Pacific Ocean is a unsinkable aircraft carrier gas station. Hawaii, Hong Kong, Taiwan, you fucking name it. All of Okinawa, Guam. These are all just little demolished indigenous territory, not stolen to put. They used to, you see, Western colonial imperialists and colonizers used to show up, steal indigenous land in the Pacific, put a bunch of Chinese slaves on it, and make a lot of money from all the milk and honey, like the Dutch and the Portuguese and the Spanish and the Americans, right? Why is it the Philippines? Because of a king in fucking Spain. Now the Euro settler colonizers and imperialists and capitalists and the collaborators with like the Japanese fascists and the KMT fucking fascists, now they come into Pacific Islands and they steal indigenous land, oppress and ban all the languages like the Okinawan indigenous languages, and they wipe everyone out to make military bases to stop the world from rebalancing, because China is the world's greatest socialist country, and it will rebalance this earth if there isn't nuclear annihilation. So it went from the Dutch in the 1600s making some money oppressing islands to the United States in the 20th century blowing islands away and then using them as missile launcher sites. Right? That's what all the THAADs are doing all over the fucking Pacific and in Korea as well. Korea is another outpost to stop China. Communist China specifically, right? Socialist, communist, collective, mutual win-win cooperation, all that stuff. The best. China has fully funded universal gender confirmation medical support for children, for trans children. China has abortion. The racism is like there's not none, but it's like addressed, and the government and the people together support continuing to work to address these problems. What is the United States doing? So that's why China must be stopped. That's why MacArthur is over there. Russia is not big enough. Russia is currently in a struggle with the United States, and there's things going. There's history is there, but it's not Russia. It's China. It's always been China. It's not really China. It's really like it's a federation of systems that radiate outward from win-win cooperation. It's the only great massive world power that has ever ascended without shedding blood and leveling entire continents, stealing land, right? Stealing land, stealing slaves, massacring people, like every great, not really great, barbarian powers, Euro-barbarian powers have risen, and Japan have risen on the suffering and the death and the enslavement of masses. China has not. And that's why China is a threat. It's not just the communism is really is the economic vaccine against the capitalism that the Western world has evolved. It's like the COVID BA6 of capitalism has a communist vaccine, but it's really there's many other layers of this story, I would argue. But importantly, the U.S. is the number one Western capitalist entity is on Taiwan to this day to stop actual existing socialism, communism, etc. Never forget that. They're going to tell you everything and all kind of bullshit about what is and what is not in Taiwan. And anyways, it's 12:56. Okay. The reason why the United States is in Hawaii is the same reason why, right? Is to blow up fucking China to this day. Including Red Hill is spilling over and killing all of our native Hawaiian people and destroying our land because they're still doing the same thing they were doing before. Anyways, so the U.S. military dumps jet fuel into our Hawaiian water supply, poisoning my family as Hawaii continues to be an unsinkable aircraft carrier used by empire against our Pacific and Asian relatives. The colonizers continue to subjugate us native Hawaiians.
We are not American! We are not American! We are not American! We are not American! Say it in your heart. Say it when you sleep. We are not American. We will die as Hawaiians. We will never be Americans. The Americans, my people, are our enemies, and you must understand that. They are our enemies. They took our land. They imprisoned our queen. They banned our language. They forcibly made us a colony of the United States. America always says they are democratic. Lies! That is a lie! They have never been democratic with Native people. They have never been democratic with Indians. They have never been democratic with Hawaiians. The United States of America is the most powerful imperialist country in the world. In the world. They control the United Nations. They control the Pacific Ocean. All these nuclear submarines circulating throughout the Pacific. The United States of America is a death country. It gives death to Native people. And the only way to fight the United States of America is to be political.
Anyway, that's how 90K trash. That's the saying it. This is in the, why am I playing that? Well, not just because this is a thing that got 24,000 likes or whatever. I don't know how many views this thing's got, but this really blew up. But people were sharing it because people are sharing it because they're like, all over the world, they're like, she's saying what I know in my heart is the truth. Even people in the United States, like somebody just said, Big Teal's like, I will die as an African. Why do you insist on this? Again, this is where the problem with patriotic quote unquote socialism in the United States. What you are in denial of who the United States is today. If you are calling yourself a patriot socialist in the United States is and will die an anti-communist country. It's telling you that every second of the day. Nancy Pelosi is screaming that in your ear right now. Why is she in Taiwan? To prevent the spread of actual communism and socialism around the world. They are doing everything possible to the nuclear threat of annihilation to every American. You know why there's a PSA for the nukes in New York City? What happened? Stop, drop, and roll if a nuclear missile hits New York City? Because they're preparing for that. The United States will see the world burn before it becomes a socialist country. So the patriot socialist, you got to get your head out of your butt. And not just that, also, you have to understand that this only by being ignorant of your own American history can you possibly believe this nonsense. The U.S. military poisoned our Hawaiian water supply. It still hasn't cleaned the jet fuel in our aquifer or shut down its tanks. All of Oahu's water supply could soon become unusable due to petroleum and saltwater contamination. They have left us to fend for ourselves. They said our water is safe and uninhabited. This is the United States committing genocide against Native Hawaiians, okay? So you want to talk about liberation? Let's talk about Hawaii. You want to talk about Taiwan? Get U.S. out of Hawaii. How about that? How about China's not going to show up with warships and threaten the U.S. military because that's not the strategy, right? But I mean, if you want to be real about that, like that would actually be legitimate. If you want to talk about liberation and decolonization and democracy for indigenous people, the United States has never been democratic with Native Hawaiians, as How 90K Trash has already very clearly and with the receipts has said. So the United States can leave Hawaii before China leaves Taiwan. This is nonsense. They are part of China. Even the United States State Department website to this moment officially recognized that because they're not stupid. There's a handful of people with educations, and they're all the people that actually stayed awake in Harvard. And that's not that many of them. And they all work at the fucking CIA. They know what the fuck is going on. They even say that. The reason why Nancy Pelosi and all this talk about Taiwan is because they do not give a shit about history, about the Chinese people in or outside Taiwan, and just like they don't give a shit about us that they're massacring in Hawaii with the jet fuel they're going to put in the F-22s that are flying to Taiwan right now. Hawaii is 250 million gallons of U.S. Empire petroleum that is currently poisoning us. You can't even keep your leaky Death Star patched up. Disgraceful. Anyways, but I'll stop being upset about that. The Chinese, anyways, back to Taiwan though. I gotta finish. Okay, it's 102. After the Chinese leader Koxinga liberated Taiwan from brutal Dutch enslavement, the Japanese later colonized Taiwan again. They again massacred and subjugated the indigenous and the Han Chinese both. The Japanese again. Who helped the people on Taiwan? By the way, was it America? Was it the United States? Was it Europe? Was it the British? Was it all those? Was it the Social Democrats in Germany? Was it the French? Who showed up to actually help anybody under colonization and enslavement? Oh no, it was the Chinese that showed up to kick the Dutch out. And then but you know what America was saying then? Oh, somebody should go back in there and fucking fix them up. That's why the U.S. backed France and Vietnam. They said no. There's inter-imperial solidarity. You see. It has never been any Western country stopping capitalism or colonialism or racism at the highest levels. They do a lot of fucking charades and Bono concerts, and you put a BLM fucking sticker on the side of fucking Kamala Harris. There has never been any actual anti-racism and anti-colonialism anywhere in the West, period. Especially when it comes to the rest of the world. Everything is window dressing. They again massacred and subjugated the indigenous and the Han Chinese, both. The Japanese did, as collaborators with the United States, as would-be imperial powers, as fascist elements. They massacred, they had a Japanization program to remove the Chinese names and replace with Japanese names. This is the Japanese Imperial Army marching into the Straits of Taipei, beginning the 50-year colonial. So, oh, look at all my anime characters. Oh, Japanese are so cute and fun. Oh, we feel so bad for the descendant of the fucking genocider Shinzo Abe's grandpa. Oh, poor Shinzo Abe. Do you know why you love Japanese stuff? Because the West has made you love their personal murder dog in Asia, Japan. That's why. You don't love Japanese people because you authentically love it. You don't even know who the fuck they are, actually. You don't. If you watch a lot of anime, you don't know who they are. You know a bunch of cartoons made by people who are a small sliver of the society, many of them very ostracized. You don't know who Asians are. You don't know who the Japanese are. You are supporting them in what they do because they are genociding Okinawa and are a military threat to project force and stop communism in China. That's why you like Japanese people. I'm sorry, I got to tell you why you like the things you like. Western diseducated. I'm sorry, I'm getting so upset right now. I should probably slow down, but it really frustrates me when people. I'm somebody with Japanese ancestry, and I know this. I'm like, I had a fascist great grandpa who walked around with a samurai sword and he murdered people. He was a bad dude, man. And I had a white grandpa who was a horrible fucking guy with a cowboy gun and he abused his Hawaiian wife. I had two horrible colonizer, white and collaborator Asian colonizers. And you just got to be like, fuck those people. I don't care they were related to me. That was terrible what they did and who they were and what they believed. Period. You got to get, this is what America, I'm sorry, you're going to have a lot of ancestors. If you're European, if you're American, if you're Canadian and you're white, you're going to have a lot of, and not just that, you're going to have a lot of shitty ancestors, man. And you just got to be like, oh man, why did you do that? But you can't be like, I just want to think highly of my racist slave-owning great grandpa because I don't want to feel bad. You got to move past that, you know? You got to move past that, you know? Or you have no future. The Japanese Imperial Army marching into the Straits of Taipei, beginning of the 50-year colonial rule. They again massacred and subjugated. Anyways, I'm so fucking. Every time I think about Taiwan, I get real riled up. So I gotta slow down. But anyways, I want people to actually learn this stuff. Okay. I gotta stop. I gotta stop picturing people specifically that have like said bullshit to me. Japan didn't just subjugate the Han onto Western Taiwan. Okay, this is the Hakka indigenous people on Taiwan. Those are Japanese flags that the Japanese came and they forced Japanized the indigenous people of the Austrian, like the Hawaiian relative indigenous people of Taiwan, and the Chinese Han on Taiwan, both. It's kind of like when white people hurt indigenous people in America, and they also hurt black people. You know, so the Japanese participated in that. Okay, and so that's it's a good metaphor. It's like, yeah, if you think it's not the same. Obviously, we can't equate. It's not the same history, but it's similar, right? It's people who you could be black and then you could join capitalism and be, you could be reactionary like Kamala or Obama, but the history is like the Chinese, the Japanese related to the Chinese, and because somebody said Taiwan is Japanese, and I'm like, well, I mean, Taiwan is Japanese in the same way that, I don't know, racist American KKK is, America's. But anyway, that's a longer story. But anyways, the Japanese Air Force, the Musha incident in the 1930s, when indigenous people rose against the Japanese colonial rule and were brutally put down. You can see this happen in Warriors of the Rainbow. So if you want to watch a movie about the indigenous people, you want to watch a real movie that actually does a little bit of history of Taiwan, you can watch this movie. It's called Warriors of the Rainbow. It's not the full history, it's just a little bit. It deals with the incident of the massacre by the Japanese, where the Japanese Air Force dropped mustard gas, chemical weapons, right? Horrible war crime, right? Not that the U.S. or the West cares about war crime. They do it all the time. They drop chemical and biological warfare all over Korea and Vietnam. They do it whenever they feel like it. The Japanese Air Force did drop mustard gas on indigenous communities, though. That is pictured in the movie, by the way. Less than 3% of Taiwan's population is indigenous today. Forced Christianization and language bans were enacted through the 20th century, and there's very, very few, sadly, remaining. Some of the indigenous people on Taiwan today are trying to recapture and reconnect, but the vast majority of Taiwan's indigenous population were wiped out by the Dutch, by the Japanese, and suppressed by the United States of America. And so that's, you want to know who's suppressing Taiwan? Again, not the Chinese. The Musha incident massacre. This is a picture of the massacre by the Japanese. Japanization, the Kominka movement. Japan started a Japanization program. Komin means emperor subject. To be Komin, you had to give up your Chinese name for a Japanese name, perform a Shinto ceremony where you renounce your Chinese ancestor, adopt a fake Japanese ancestor. Japan also, again, colonized Okinawa, or Ryukyuan or Luchuan area there. And they did similar things of forced assimilation and language bans and all kind of terrible things. The landlord elite on Taiwan who collaborated with the Japanese colonizers gladly went along with this. So who is Nancy Pelosi visiting? Tsai Ing-wen. Who's Tsai Ing-wen, right? Who does she represent? A U.S.-backed separatist right-winger. She applauded for Donald Trump. And the Taiwanese that Nancy Pelosi is visiting, they actually freaked out and they had a big explosion. They had a meltdown when Donald Trump lost, right? So they're actually right. They're right. I mean, anyways, but they always are. It's just like the Bolivia and Áñez administration. Anyways, so Tsai Ing-wen is a U.S.-backed right-wing separatist, is a descendant of one of the wealthy business families in Taiwan. So Tsai Ing-wen is part of those people who collaborated with the Japanese and made a lot of money doing it and participated in horrible racism and genocide and oppression of the masses of the people in collaboration with Japanese and other U.S. and global capitalist and imperialist entities. So that's who's being supported. These are not the people. This is not again, very clear. This is not the U.S. is not going to, Nancy Pelosi and the U.S. is not going with Biden to do indigenous liberation or decolonization or stop China's aggression. They're going there to destroy the world, actually, and start nuclear war, but they're going there to prevent the spread of communism and maintain capitalism and maintain oppression and maintain imperialism. That's what the U.S. is doing there. Do not mistake it. They're going to tell you bullshit. Don't mistake it. In this dark colonial era, sovereign Hawaii was building racial equality and socialist cooperation and anti-imperial alliance. We had the world's highest literacy rate, invented universal health care, public mass transit, full citizenship for Asian, African, and West, as the West enslaved. So you know this thread. I do it a lot. So this is Hawaii with socialism. Again, before 1898, when did Taiwan go back to what was taken from China, right? 1895. Right after that, United States taking Hawaii. So a lot of this is happening in the same time period. If you look at this history, fall of China is when mid-1800s. When are the Chinese coming to Hawaii? Why are they coming to Hawaii? Because China is being subjugated, opium wars, and plundered by Britain and the United States and other colonial entities. Chinese are coming to Hawaii to cooperate, to go back, hopefully, to rebuild China, right? So this history, I'm going to write an entire history book one day. I don't have tough fucking time. Other people are writing it. But that's the history you need to know. You don't need to know fucking 1492, some idiot lost his way. You don't need to know 1776, some racist murderers did some racist murdering. Who the fuck cares? This is the history you need to know. This is the world. This is real world history. It's how 2/3 of the planet, that's Asia and the Pacific, teamed up with Pacific Islands to build, and with African people who had free citizenship, to try to undo colonialism and struggled their best. Right, where we had the 98% literacy rate, the world's highest literacy rate in Hawaii, right, with Asian citizens. Part of this was about we're trying to help China and the rest of Asia get up on their feet so they can help us get up and stop these colonizers from eradicating all of us. Hawaiians saw what happened to Native Americans. Hawaiians saw what enslavement in Africa. Hawaiians saw all what's happening in Asia because Hawaiians were more educated than you by far and more educated than me by far. And they knew what the fuck was going on. Unlike everyone in America who thinks that Taiwan is some place where we're going to liberate, right? Hawaiians built a socialist advanced system, not perfect, but advancing along the path of socialism, just like Vietnam, Cuba, Bolivia, or China is doing today. Universal healthcare, public mass transit, full citizenship for Asians, etc. The father of modern China right? Both the PRC and the ROC. Xi Jinping recently, they have to commemorate it because he is the beginning of the liberation process. Sun Yat-sen was raised in actual socialist, the most advanced socialist country in the world, Hawaii, in the 1800s. So, the father of China used Hawaii, as I bring up often. Again, you see the context of this in the context of Taiwan. Again, even more stark and striking. The independent kingdom of Hawaii, or the independent socialist country of Hawaii, but they didn't say that in the time, was a model of technologically modern, politically independent, and actively anti-imperialist China that Sun Yat-sen, whose brother was a rancher on Maui, Hawaii, under win-win worker cooperatives, Asian and Hawaiian and different ethnicity cooperatives, as opposed to racist plantations, racist capitalist plantations with enforced racism. So worker cooperatives between Hawaiian and Asians, when the U.S. and West treated them both as coolie servants and labor, mass lynched to Asians, banned them from doing all but women's work, laundromats and restaurants, which is why they're cooking and cleaning and everything everywhere all at once. Which is why, right, Umma's mother suffers in America because all that Asians can do is be subservient, cooking and cleaning, and impoverished in Chinatown, and they get lynched and murdered, right? Like the 6 Asian women in the parlor and all the elders being knocked over in the street, and nobody writes any news stories because it's too boring for Americans now, right? Too boring to talk about Asian murder now for Americans. The key proposal of Sun Yat-sen in the 1800s was socialism, based on Hawaiian socialism. And so Hawaii is, Hawaii was a model and a place to organizing the wealth the cooperative wealth accumulated because socialism builds wealth and prosperity collectively, was used by Sun Mei to fund the revolution, the Xing Cheng Hui in China, and later the Tong Ming Hui. So literally, not only was Hawaii inspired socialist China, Hawaii also was where because you couldn't build any wealth. Sun Yat-sen could not go to California and make money because Californians were lynching Asians and stopping them from doing anything but women's work. Do you see how patriot socialism and not dealing with the misogyny, right? And the anti-Starbucks worker shit that's like Hawaiian plantation and American racist plantation shit 101, man. Break the workers across, male, female lines. You're a Starbucks worker. You're not a real worker. Only real man jobs calling as real jobs. This is fucking Western capitalist 101, And Hawaii figured this thing out. We're not gonna have racism. We're not gonna have sexism. We're gonna address it. Just like China does today, right? We are gonna address it because if that is allowed to perpetuate, we will fail to undo capitalism and racism and sexism. And Sun studied this, was awarded the Mother of Universal Healthcare, awarded Sun Yat-sen the second in grammar, and took that knowledge and experience back to China, and then proceeded to build the path towards socialism that was later continued through Mao Zedong. And Mr. MacArthur was all crying in his little American whoppers, oh no, the Chinese built some communism, fuck. And that's why Mr. MacArthur was what? Building unsinkable aircraft carriers under oppression and fascism in Taiwan. Evil deeds done by sovereign Hawaii, the world's first universal healthcare system. Anyway, I've already gone through this, so I'm gonna skip this. Sorry, I gotta go eat a little bit of food, then I'm gonna go do another stream. But anyways, if you want more history on this, watch the video by Carl Jha, historical context on China and Taiwan, presented at, I think it was a Code Pink or No Cold War forum like last year. But if you want more of this context, you can watch this entire thing. Carl is a Chinese historian and a podcaster, Silk and Steel podcast host, and there's lots of I've got so many panels on this. Stop Asia Pacific Imperialism panel with Luna Yongno is a Korean. Speaking of Korea, Danny Haifong was in this one. Vietnamese diaspora journalist, and Carl Jha is a Chinese educator, and Shaw Merray is another is a Micronesian ancestry or Palauan ancestry, another Pacific Island ancestry person working in Turtle Island. Anyways. What is Asia Pacific decolonization? So Asia Pacific cooperation. We also have an Okinawan representative. That's Akemi is in this one. So we have almost everyone in this one. We have Aotearoa, Vietnam, China, Vietnam diaspora, and Okinawa, which is right next to what? Taiwan. Again, how does Asia Pacific decolonization relate to decolonization in Turtle Island and land back? And how does the indigenous struggle and the Red Deal, which is a book you should read as well, connect with decolonization in Asia Pacific, you can watch that one. So anyways, and this is a thread about Neofeud, my game about my life as an impoverished Hawaiian social worker and STEM teacher for the poor and homeless here in illegal U.S. occupation, living in slums beneath billionaire mansions, and my experiences related through the lens of satirical cyberpunk. And I gotta go. So I'm over time, but anyways, long story short, go watch this movie. It's a very good movie. The horror of being Asian in the Western world is vast and expansive and multi-century. And it doesn't stop at the borders of California and New York. It goes everywhere because the world is seen as a giant lake/treasure box of the United States and all of Euro capitalist, colonialist dick shits. I don't know that dicks can shit, but anyway. Shout out to Sandra Oh and Sam Raimi for producing this very good show. And yeah, shout out to all of our Korean and Young No and we might get Mel, Chaos's Mel, might show up on the panel later on, so we're going to talk about that. Anyways, Neofeud is the game. Check it out, pick it up. It's not on sale. Wishlist it. Decolonators is the other game. Speaking of Asian, the horrors of being Asian, this is a game about Asians fighting back against colonial capitalist dickheads like the people, like the Dutch and the Japanese and the Americans that colonized and destroyed and oppressed Taiwan. This is about the Vietnamese, another Asian people fighting back against that oppression. The Vietnamese were more successful, sadly, than some of the people on Taiwan. But we still hold out for the U.S. getting kicked out of Taiwan and getting the fuck out, stop interfering, so that the Chinese and indigenous people on Taiwan can work together to build socialism. I'm looking forward to that. But this is a game where you can play Asians kicking colonizers' asses, voiced by Luna Oi. Also, this is a book by Holly. My partner is Holly Argent. Woman is a book about right-wing conservative Christianity. Jordan Peterson. That's not about Jordan Peterson. It's a book that is kind of critiquing evangelical Protestant Christianity through a satirical book from the perspective of Mary writing about the events in the Bible. So if you want to check that out, you can find that, get it for free, or throw some money our way. Support us at patreon.com/neofeud for our to get access to the Silver Discord and ongoing updates on what we're doing here at the Silver Spook Cooperative /Hui. Speaking of worker cooperatives, the word Hui is an Asian, Hawaiian, Vietnamese, Chinese, and Maori word. Asian and Pacific word that means a meeting, coming together, working together, and that's what we do here. So if you want to support us here, you can check out patreon.com/neofeud, and also follow us at Silver Spook Games at octanon.social on Mastodon, or at Silver Spook Games at mastodon.social for Mastodon. Follow me at Silver Spook. I'm going to blast through this because I got to go. At Silver Spook Guy for my personal takes. Silver Spook Games for the games related stuff on Twitter. Yeah, it's going to skip a few things, but you can follow. You can follow Terminus C is a 3D cyberpunk adventure game that I'm working on, and is cyberpunk RPG that's coming out in the near future. Low poly cyberpunk game like Deus Ex and System Shock. Almost finished, so you can follow that. You can follow Holly is again my partner, Mod and VA. Thanks so much for modding. Working on the next season of the lounge show with Kate Nix, which I'm often in. And Kate also voices the evil, wicked, imperialist witch of the West, Miss Thatcher in Decolonators, and also Holly. Anyways, so Holly Mods for Magic Storytime is a writer and a parent and primary caregiver to two keiki or children here at the Silver Spook Cooperative. And also follow. If you want, there's another Native Hawaiian to follow is comma_1983, stopping desecration and trying to do decolonizational work, spreading information on Twitter, as well as Lee Mahana is writing a book actually about Kanaka socialism, about all the things I'm talking about. I hope that some of these things get included. In fact, if Lee Mahana is watching, you can I don't have time to write books, but you include everything I said and you throw it in the book. I'm actually going to be credited in this next book, but I do not have all the time in the world. I got less time to eat lunch and do panels, so I got to get out. But follow at Kanaka Socialist and the YouTube channel of this other Native Hawaiian working on building socialism, who has also been featured on Luna Oi. And that is the end. I'm sorry I went way fucking overtime. Thanks a lot, everybody. I'm trying to blast through this one. Sorry about that, because I gotta go do the panel very soon. Thanks so much for everybody. Thanks for watching. Sorry I went on a few extra tangents, but I feel like they were worth it. in this ridiculous moment with ridiculous Nancy Pelosi. And keep your Mercedes polish. Be excellent to each other. Get that honey. Wear that hanbok proudly. Don't let nobody tell you can't wear no hanbok. You wear that. You wear whatever clothes you want. Wear your native clothes. Make songs that piss off colonizers. Don't let nobody tell you what you can and what you cannot do. And don't tell them who you can and who you can't support. You have to support America and Hawaii and America helping Taiwan. Fuck you. Anyways, until next time, keep your Mercedes boss and be excellent to each other. Thanks a lot. Take it easy, Big Teal, William De Silva, and Tay. We're hanging out.